Welcome to another episode of Calling All Commenters, the name I went with in the end. Last episode, I asked people to suggest SCPs in the comments. And I also put out notifications on Twitter and Patreon, and I got way too many results. I literally spent over an hour today combing through them to narrow them down to 10 that I wanted to talk about.
So how many did you start with?
About 60 or 70.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. I wanted ones where, as I read them, I would think to myself, I would never have come up with this because it's just so random. It's just so out there that it would be very difficult for a person to independently come up with this idea, if that makes sense. Yeah. I should probably explain to people who don't know what an SCP is. So, there's a website online which is basically anybody can contribute to it, and it documents these supposedly strange and anomalous things that exist in our world. So it can be any item that has some kind of attribute that defies reason and logic, or can be a danger to people or things. Unlike last time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Nisha to read them out, because I think last episode most of it was just me talking. So, okay. Are you ready with a Google page?
No.
Get a Google page. Begin by searching for SCP-504. And I would like you to read the description.
Oh no, reading. SCP-504 is a species of tomato, physically and genetically identical to that of the typical commercially grown tomato. So it's just looks like a regular tomato.
Just a tomato, nothing visibly interesting about it.
It was recovered in Redacted, Kentucky, after a woman reported to the police that her former husband had been, quote, murdered by his lunch.
Okay, so we're gearing up. We're gearing up to the interesting part.
When a poor attempt at humour is made verbally within human hearing range of SCP-504's tomatoes, they instantly accelerate to a speed of at least 100 miles per hour. I'm already crying. Approximately 160 kilometers per hour, 45 meters per second. In the direction of the sound source.
So these tomatoes apparently get offended by bad jokes. If they hear someone make a bad joke, they will fly at that person.
Oh my god.
How fast they fly is dependent on how bad they think the joke is. Like, if you read the descriptions, the tests at the bottom, it starts to describe these experiments where they're getting the subjects to say bad jokes. The notes that the scientists write down is, it appears SCP-504 has a certain taste in jokes. This might indicate sapience. I hope not.
Oh my god.
So these tomatoes are not only offended by bad jokes, but they have their own specific taste in how bad jokes are. So
it's not just a generic bad joke, is what they find funny, what they don't find funny.
And there's a part in here about how they're trying to remove the strains of it that could be elsewhere. So they haven't even contained it properly by the sounds of it. So at any point you could just be on a tomato field.
They look like normal tomatoes, so how would you know?
Well, when they go through your head, you'd know.
Like a little bullet. Tomato bullet.
Well, I love this because at the bottom there's so many tests, and it's the result of them. Tomato clocked in at 124 miles per hour. Subject suffered a broken nose.
Let me read some of the jokes. I tried to walk into Target, but I missed. All 4 pieces clocked 212 miles per hour.
Subject severely injured.
Okay, I like that one.
Yeah, that's a pretty decent one to start off with.
Yeah, like you said, who thinks up with these things?
Exactly. So this is the angle I wanted for this episode. It's where you read it and you go, I could have come up with something similar, but the exact idea of a tomato that flies at your head if you make a bad joke is something where only one person's going to put that down. So I would now like to look for SCP-871. Describe what you're seeing in the picture.
It's like a chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake.
With some sort of biscuity base. So SCP-871 is a collection of 237 cakes. Instances of SCP-871 vary wildly in appearance and size. I don't know why I said it like that. Appearance and size. covering the entire range of foods described by humans as, quote, cake. When any instance of SCP-871 is consumed by a human or a collection of humans, it is replaced approximately 24 hours afterwards with a similar cake. This cake will appear on a flat surface in the vicinity of the location where the previous instance was eaten.
There you go. So far, nothing too out of the ordinary. We have 237 cakes. If you eat one, it reappears within 24 hours. Not too strange.
So it's like infinite cake.
Infinite cake, yeah. So go down to where it says SCP-871's danger.
Any instance of SCP-871 which is not consumed will cause a new cake to be created in its vicinity after 24 hours. While this is similar to its normal replacement behaviour, the original instance will continue to exhibit the same properties, replicating if damaged and continuing to replace itself every 24 hours. This behaviour... Wait, what?
So, what we have here are infinitely replicating cakes.
Yeah.
So, if you don't eat it within 24 hours, it makes a new one, which also needs to be eaten within 24 hours. Which means, in order to manage this thing, they have to have...
them.
Yeah, all 237 have to be eaten every day.
Oh my god.
I like this idea that if you don't eat these cakes, then they just continue to duplicate until the world is overtaken by cake.
Oh, it'll be like that scene from that scene from Matilda, where Miss Trunchbull makes that kid eat that chocolate cake and he just can't eat anymore. That'll be like
Bruce Bogtrotter.
Just imagine you sat in your house, just on the couch, like I can't eat anymore. All these cake crumbs over your mouth and just cake appearing like all around you, just being replaced. Every 24 hours. I can't do this anymore, and you're just suffocated by cake. There's just too many.
That vault in Harry Potter where the spell makes things duplicate, just that but cake. Just cake everywhere. Too much cake. More cake than you can manage.
No.
If you read the containment procedures, then it specifies that Class D are to be escorted by armed guards, sealed inside and forced to eat the cake. If they need additional motivation, the termination of one of the personnel is authorized, so they shoot people if they don't eat the cake.
Oh my god.
The room has to be thoroughly searched to make sure not a single part of the cake remains.
So you have to eat every single crumb?
Yes.
Oh my god.
I realised that the way I didn't order these specifically like this, but the next one's also got food in it. Maybe I was hungry when I was doing this list.
Maybe.
SCP-4252.
Do
you see the picture?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Looks like baked beans stuck in a clock.
That's pretty much what it is. So I'll do a quick summary of the first part of this, because the part I want you to read is a little lower down. So SCP-4252 is actually a few different things. They're all different items, but these are all items that are just for some reason full of baked beans. So one of them's a clock. There's a leather suitcase, there's a Starbucks coffee cup, and there's a car. All four of them are different objects with the same properties. And the property is that the beans reproduce infinitely. So we have another situation of infinite food. However, there is a way to deal with this one that isn't just forcing Class D personnel. And that is by summoning an entity. If you would like to read the part that begins with SCP-4252 is a humanoid entity.
SCP-4252 is a humanoid entity no more than half a metre tall. It wears a long silk robe covered in jewels and a crown made of bronze with a single ruby ovoid in the centre. SCP-4252 is able to manifest and demanifest, however, prior to Incident 01, it was only ever observed to appear when a specific phrase found on SCP-4252-B was spoken. Is this the phrase that's further down?
Yes, I'd like you to read the phrase, please.
Jethucent the Mighty King, please bless our presence with your own. Consume our bubbling beanious bile from up atop your sparkling throne.
So I think what happens is there's like a ribbon with this poem on it, and if you read it, it summons this half-a-metre king who asks that you bow to him and compliment him shitloads. And if you do it correctly, he'll go and eat all the beans.
What even?
Exactly.
I want to see this humanoid. I want to see it.
Well, the
It's not a
humanoid.
picture of him. Yeah.
No, I guess not. It's just the clock, but it's just like who sat down one day to write this SCP and thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick 4 completely different objects, fill them with beans, and make the only fix to summon a half meter tall king who eats them all if you're nice to him.
Maybe they like use those random generators you get online. You know, when you just generate a word.
Possibly.
They just use them.
Clock, suitcase, beans, king.
Yeah. I come up with an SCP from that. That could be like a challenge.
Oh,
Like
you
you
do that in
get
future,
like
yeah.
5 random words. You have to come up with an SCP. That's interesting.
Anyway, let's move forwards to SCP-3008.
SCP-3008 is a large retail unit previously owned by and branded as IKEA. Person entering SCP-3008 through the main entrance and then passing out of sight of the doors will find themselves translocated to SCP-3008-1. This kind of sounds like IKEA anyway. They just get lost.
It's basically a parody of what happens when you walk into an IKEA. So what happens is when you walk through the door, you're teleported to an instance of this IKEA, which is 10 kilometers squared, and apparently so many people are stuck in that they've started their own civilization in there. And the whole point of it is to use the furniture to create fortifications to protect themselves from what appear to be strangely misshapen IKEA employees.
Oh, like a blue and yellow blur.
Well, they're wearing the uniforms, like the yellow shirt and the blue trousers, but they're either too tall or too short, and they're really weirdly shaped and have no facial features.
Oh, that's really creepy.
Yep, and the store has a day-night cycle, which is.
Are you sure they're not just walking around with without the glasses? Because that sounds like someone who forgot their glasses would see. Like they get lost, they can't find their way out, and everyone just looks a little bit off, a bit blurry, no facial features.
This SCP was created by somebody whose glasses fell off in an IKEA.
Yeah.
The police found them like barricaded behind a couple of beds, just throwing random lamps at the employees who were trying to get them out. Apparently there are exits, but they move around, so they're difficult to find. It's basically a maze. God, imagine, right? You know the Maze Runner. Imagine that, but it was in IKEA. That is what this is. Like, there's a civilization in that middle of that maze in the Maze Runner. This is Maze Runner with IKEA. This next one is weird.
Okay.
3660.
Okay, so SCP-3660 is a black metal zipper, similar to these found on sweaters and backpacks. The item is in poor condition. SCP-3660 is non-anomalous and inert until it is pressed against the skin of a human being.
Okay, so without reading any further, what you've heard so far is that it's a zip that can be pressed into your skin. What do you think happens when the zip is pulled down?
Your skin gets peeled off?
Well, in a manner of speaking, I guess.
Oh
Read from within 10 minutes.
god. Within 10 minutes, SCP-3660 will activate and unzip the host's skin by dragging itself across the epidermis before detaching from the skin. This process not only hollows the subject, but also gives their skin the consistency and composition of silicone rubber. Ugh.
After it's been on for 10 minutes, your skin becomes almost this strange rubber material, and it will unzip itself and the skin will fall off, revealing...
As SCP-3660 activates, an animal will be synthesized inside the skin. What?
So what happens is you put the zip on the skin, and it somehow turns everything inside your body into an animal, and then the skin unzips and the animal comes out. The animal has the identity, personality, memories of the person who the zip was attached to.
So you just become an animal, basically.
Yeah, it transfigures you into an animal and then leaves your skin behind. So now there's pictures on the page of the mouse and the peacock and the shark make more sense. They're all people who are unzipped.
But, like, what if you're in, like, say, the middle of IKEA and you get unzipped into a shark? What happens?
Then I guess you're fucked. I mean, you could win the animal lottery, couldn't you? Get, like, a lion or something cool.
Yeah.
But you might just, get a crappy mouse. Or
Just be a flea.
Flea. Boring little flea. A harmless little flea.
I'll put that flea in a box. Then put that box in a box. I'll make it to myself. I'll smash it with a hammer.
Well, from one animal-related one to another, SCP-2952.
Cute doggy.
Yeah, it's a cute doggy, isn't it? Nothing wrong with that doggy.
Mm-hmm.
This one's so difficult to understand.
Oh no.
Read it.
So SCP-2952 is a male Pembroke Welsh corgi measuring over 30,000 kilometres in length. The head and front legs of the SCP are located in Portland, Oregon, while the hindquarters are located in a rural area of Japan's, I'm sorry if I'm butchering words, Kariwa district.
We have a corgi that goes between America and Japan. On its own.
Okay.
A bit weird on its own.
Yeah.
Now read the next paragraph.
At certain areas along SCP's length, small openings will form along its sides. When these openings appear, humanoid beings will exit. What? So people will just come out the dog? Or humans will come out the dog.
So when this was sent to me, they described it as the corgi that's also a train.
The corgi train.
So this thing stretches between two countries, and apparently there's loads of stops along the way. 324 stops along the way that little people get out of and in of. I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know why.
Why any of these?
I have no idea what the point of the tiny people that climb out of the corgi is, but yeah, no, that's what it is. It's a corgi
train. It's literally a corgi train.
Imagine petting that dog.
You'd probably have to get a helicopter to. I imagine it's. Well, that's the thing. I don't know how. It says it's
30 kilometers long.
In length, but I don't know how. Well, I suppose corgis are quite short, aren't they? So.
Well, if you look at the picture, that's meant to be the front half of it, or the front part of it. Sorry.
Oh my god! Why is my brain's thinking it's absolutely massive in I know not just length but massive overall.
No, it's meant to be a normal sized corgi that just happens to be 30 kilometers long.
I'm just thinking of this giant corgi.
Why would the people coming out of it be 3 centimeters if the corgi was giant?
Why not? It doesn't matter what size the corgi is.
Wait, so you thought it covered the entire surface of the planet?
Pretty much, yeah.
When it said it was 30 kilometres, you thought you meant that the 30 kilometres corgi scaled up, lying over both continents.
Yeah.
You don't think somebody would have spotted that?
Well, these aren't real, are they? So
no, but they're meant to be things that could possibly exist and have been contained or had been dealt with. If there was a corgi that was kaiju size, Galactus corgi just lying over the planet, I think we'd all have noticed.
Maybe only certain people can see it, I don't know.
SCP-2966.
SCP-2966 is an anomalous roll of redacted brand toilet paper. The roll currently averages a mass of around redacted kilograms. Though attempting to reduce this mass is discouraged as a result of Incident 2966-35A.
So what we have so far is a toilet roll inside a metal toilet roll container on a wall. Nothing particularly strange, do you think?
Not too weird. No, not really.
Not at all. Read the next paragraph.
SCP is anomalous. I hate that word. In that it is effectively an infinite roll of toilet paper.
Here we go again. So we got some more infinity stuff. Toilet roll that lasts forever. However, this one has an interesting byproduct of its infinitiness. That's a word, right? Infiniteness. Read the next paragraph.
Next paragraph. Okay, so the SCP obeys the laws of mass energy conservation and through unknown means absorbs energy from its surroundings in order to create the matter that makes up the toilet paper. So one sheet of the SCP weighs approximately 3 grams, which means that approximately 2.04 times 10 to the power of 16 joules of energy, or roughly 65 tons of TNT, is needed for one sheet.
So
what the fuck?
So a lot of these talk about how the SCP doesn't obey the rules of physics or of mass conservation, etc. It can create matter out of thin air. This one doesn't. So in order for this thing to create mass, it needs the energy relevant to do so. And that energy just so happens to be a fucking shit ton. So, yeah.
Roughly 65 tons of TNT.
So I'm not quite... Because I read quite a lot of this one trying to figure out what would happen. It sounds like it should be way more dangerous than they describe. Because they said if you remove 10 sheets at a time, then it'll absorb the heat energy, it'll absorb sound energy, and the area around it will become freezing cold and stuff like that. But they described it as it being 65 tons of TNT to make one paper, which to me sounds like it would definitely, absorb more energy around it than is in any way safe.
It would just drain people's energy.
Yeah, if it's taking heat energy, then everything within whatever mile radius of it will be, just all of the heat will be absorbed, and then everything will just freeze. So maybe it's because I'm not too familiar with the idea of mass and energy conservation when it comes to transforming matter. So if anyone in the comments can explain that for us, of how this thing turns energy into paper and why. Because it talks about how staff have to sacrifice themselves to remove some sheets, but surely removing sheets makes the problem worse because then it needs more energy.
Oh, stuff I know you don't watch Dragon Ball. I'm thinking of do you know how the spirit bomb works?
Yeah, you have to charge it up for 20 years.
20 years. That's what I'm imagining the toilet paper's like. It's lend me your energy.
Just so somebody can wipe their ass.
Imagine the public toilet. It's be a fucking nightmare.
Every time you try and wipe, the entire area around you just goes nuclear.
Oh no.
Oh, just walk around. Everybody has to walk around with a shit on their ass because there's no other option. A jet aircraft for means of escape, just in case it reaches critical.
It's critical toilet roll. You can't take it seriously.
Nuclear toilet roll. Imagine the first person who discovered it.
Next, please. Next.
Next is SCP-4521. This is my favourite.
SCP-4521 is a Douglas fir tree with abnormal shape and leaves. It was discovered within God's Silence, Oregon, after reports of ear-piercing silence from within the tree's vicinity. Ear-piercing silence.
Keep reading.
Currently, the SCP's anomalous property is that it is incapable of screaming. No apparatuses are found on SCP that allow it to scream, and attempting to create one has been met with failure. So, it's just a quiet tree that's trying to make scream.
It's just a tree.
It's just a fucking tree.
So, from what I can tell, I can't tell if it's a joke or not, because ear-piercing silence, does that mean that people were actually, because to me, ear-piercing silence makes it sound like it's a joke, but were people's hearing damaged by something that they said was the tree, but they can't replicate the noise? But what it reads like is that somebody said, this is a weird tree. So the SCP Foundation came in, picked up the tree and were like, why won't it scream? And they're just torturing this poor tree.
Why won't it scream?
But if you look through the tests of all the different ways they've tried to make it scream, they've carved a mouth on it, they've branded the word slave onto it, covered it in spiders, bought a similar tree and destroyed it.
God.
It's the fact that they get trees that are genetically similar or related to and redacted. What did you do to this tree?
The audio file interview. Can you hear me? Silence. Did you say something? Silence. Oh, that was my imagination. I'm sorry. Silence. Listen, do you want to talk? Do you have something on your mind? Just let it out. Silence. Come on, it's not healthy to bottle it up.
This goes on for so long.
Please, you're scaring me. Silence.
At the bottom, but I can help you. You need to scream. Silence. You need to scream. You need to scream. You need to scream. Dr. Hans proceeds to say the exact same phrase for 37 hours before being escorted out. So is it that people are... Maybe the SCP is the fact that people are obsessed with making a tree scream. Maybe that's the point.
Poor tree.
It's
just sat there doing nothing. It's minding its own business.
Unless the tree's anomalous property is that it makes people around it want it to scream. There are some of them in here that are very meta. Like, there's one that I looked at where I have to... when I refer to myself, I have to refer to me as myself. It makes no sense without showing someone the page. But there's a lot of meta ones out there that I like. There's somewhere the actual page is glitching and the SCP is the description of the page itself. There's ones where they say it's been further redacted, but you can open it with bare clearance. So I won't be surprised if it was a meta joke about the fact that the SCP Foundation is being like mentally manipulated to not understand why they're looking at the tree. They think they're trying to make it scream because that's what it is. It's the screaming tree. But what it actually does is make people think that it does scream.
Actually, it's just a poor little tree.
It's just a poor tree minding its own business.
Aww.
The fact that they bring in other trees and torture them in front of the tree to try and make it scream. Oh god, okay, we've got two more left to go. We've been recording for 45 minutes. I imagine I'll cut this down to something reasonable. This one is SCP-1313, so 1313.
A bear.
A bear indeed.
What kind of bear?
It's actually not a bear, you'll see.
Okay, so SCP-1313 is an anomalous series of logical processes capable of being defined as a mathematical equation, which the answer is a single female specimen of Ursus arctos?
Ursus arctos is the name for I think a grizzly bear. Ursus arctos is a brown bear, not a grizzly bear. This one... So you can continue reading. It's just standard SCP gobbledygook. But what it is a formula, which if you solve the formula, it just makes a bear appear next to you.
What?
So you can't contain this. It's impossible to contain it because it's just apparently just a quirk of maths. This thing just exists. There is a formula. God. In science, you know how there's there's the formula for gravity and the formula for working out force and stuff. There's also just a formula for create bear next to you. So the whole idea is that the people have to just try and monitor for people who have discovered the formula and then get rid of it when anyone sees it.
I wonder if there's more formulas to basically manifest food next to you or something. You can't eat food until you solve this equation.
Well, there's that Futurama movie where there's the formula for time travel that's on Bender's ass. So it's like that idea that there's a mathematical formula that when solved, then it will produce an actual physical effect in the world. So maybe if in the SCP universe there are formulas which can generate matter out of thin air if you solve them. So there could be other examples of it. Maybe you could, like you said, generate food. Or maybe you could, I don't know, make yourself twice as big. Or on fire.
I'm just thinking, if you were really good at maths, you'd have so much stuff.
It'd be a great way to assassinate a professor, though. You just write it on the chalkboard in their room, but without the answer. But then you're not allowed to think of the answer, because if you solve it, then the bear will appear.
Oh, yeah, so you're not even allowed to think it.
I don't know, actually. I don't know whether you have to write it down, but it's a formula, so it must just be that if the pieces are in place, even if they're in your mind. During the reading of the document, if you have pondered the nature of it to such a degree that you feel you have independently formulated a portion of its structure, you are advised to make your way to the nearest amnestic distribution station. A failure to do so might result in disciplinary action and or bear-related injury.
Mauled by a bear.
Oh, God. All right, we're going to get to the last one now. This one was recommended by a lot of people. And for most of the ones that were recommended by a lot of people, I didn't want to talk about them because I assume that the reason they're known by a lot of people is because they've appeared somewhere else prominently. But when I read this one, I had to bring it up because this is the epitome of only one person would think of this.
Okay.
SCP-1728.
So it is a humanoid entity, 1.5 meters in height and 57 kilograms in weight. While otherwise human in form, the entity lacks a head. Despite this, the entity is capable of functioning with normal human-like capacity and has no apparent sensory, motor, or metabolic difficulties. It cannot speak, but is capable of writing. Subject has a grasp of the English language, similar to that of a child of 8 to 10 years of age, and its intelligence shows likewise.
So, weird creature. 1.5 meters tall, no head. Continue.
The SCP continuously exudes a substance chemically identical to unsalted dairy butter from the surface of its body. Because of this, the entity has an extremely low coefficient in friction. Removing the butter results in more being exuded to replace it. So
it continuously produces butter from its skin. Not only that, but further down, it also has, and on the ends of its fingers, it has hollow points of bone that it can fire butter through.
What?
Okay.
What the hell?
It's just. But the part about this that makes so we've already got weird, tall, headless creature that covers with and sprays butter, right?
Right.
There's an instance of this one. So obviously some SCPs, as we've already covered, have other parts of them, other instances. So they're always designated as -1, -2. So SCP 1728-1 is an instance of this creature. It's related to this creature. What is it, Nisha?
Okay. So SCP 1728-1 is a 22 centimeter long steel knife with a handle made of cast iron. SCP-1728 cannot easily hold onto any item other than that one. So it can only hold a knife.
Yep. So the only thing it can hold easily is a knife. It's a special knife, and this thing will basically, it seems to exist to get this knife. And because it's so slippery, it can get out of most restraints. You can't hold it still. It is a master of just not being able to be caught, and it really, really wants its knife.
That's really creepy.
Yeah, I don't know, if they describe what happens when it gets its knife. Because they can talk to it, it can write stuff. Because it doesn't have a head, but it's got a level of sentience.
There's an interview here. I'm a milkmaid's son. I turn to butter. When can I have my knife back? I want my knife. It's mine.
Not now.
That's really creepy. The whole headless buttery thing. It's creepy anyway, but then it can only hold a knife and it just wants its knife. It's just very murderous.
They found a way to restrain it, which is using a special kind of material, which is polyurethane. And they can also change the temperature to... So I think if they keep the temperature low, it moves slowly. It's difficult to hold on to, but sufficient heat loss can cause it to mostly solidify. Okay, so they have to keep it cold in order to stop it from escaping. And they raise the temperature of the room to talk to it, but they have to restrain one of its arms and then let its other one write. But obviously, as you can see from that little interview, it gets really annoyed if you won't let it have its knife and tries to escape again.
Because I stabbed lady.
Yeah, I don't like how it, does it want to kill people with a knife, or does it just want the knife?
I don't know.
Sometimes ladies don't like getting stabbed. Sometimes ladies are angry witches.
Creepy.
I think there's something, because it's really daft, but there is something very creepy about that.
There's a bit here that says the Foundation recovers you in the blank forest. You were inside a tree. Do you think it was the silent tree?
Maybe.
They're all just like connected in some way.
They do link ones to others. Like while I was doing this, I discovered a new type of SCP class that I didn't know of. But yeah, so obviously there's safe, which is the properties aren't like going to damage anyone. It's containable without it causing a problem. Euclid is like there's anomalous properties that we don't quite understand. Keter is massively dangerous. But then there's also one called Thaumiel, which I'd never seen before. But apparently a Thaumiel SCP is one that is used to contain other SCPs.
Oh.
So they find an SCP that has a property which can be used against a different one, and that becomes a Thaumiel one, if that's how it's pronounced. But like, there's also neutralize. Obviously means that they've dealt with the issue. But there's also Apollyon, Archon, and there's various other things like distribution classes, risk classes, esoteric classes, secondary classes.
It's very in depth, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's because anyone can add to it, so people just go through and do what they want. So like, if you have an idea for one, then you can quite easily.
But you need to make sure your idea's already not been done. And there's thousands.
I think there'll be some people who will be like the moderators or something of the site, and they might go on when you add a new one and check it and see if it's interesting. Maybe you have to become part of the actual like community on the site and be active before they'll let you actually make them, because otherwise, like I said, literally anybody could add them. Like at the moment, there appear to be maybe 6,000 of them, 7,000 of them, and there's also joke ones as well under the J category, like intentionally stupid ones. I think there's one that's like Shia LaBeouf, and everyone he looks at is Shia LaBeouf, or everyone that he sees is Shia LaBeouf. I can't. It's something like that. But no, yeah. So that's
there's one called That Bitch
under the J category.
Yeah.
The Butt Ghost. SCP-789J is kept in my toilet and only I can talk to it. SCP-789J is a ghost that is a face. It lives in a toilet and it talks to you while you poop. Then when you poop, it goes, "No, stop, ah!" and then stops because there's poop in its mouth.
Oh.
It travels around in butts. You can only get rid of it by wiping. That is the moral of the story. Sometimes it kills other butts and makes them butt ghosts too. But it's only lonely because it's always lonely because it's a butt ghost. If you fall in the toilet, it eats your butt.
It's definitely must be a fan of, what is it? Is it Film Cow that does that?
Yeah, the ghost house.
Definitely a Film Cow fan.
The spooky ghost butts.
Oh shit.
But yeah, look, that's the 10 I chose. Good luck to future Brad editing this down into something digestible. But no, is tomato still your favourite?
I do kind of like the tree.
The tree is
as
good,
well.
isn't it? I like the tree.
The tree and the tomatoes. The butter one's quite funny. I think the interview made it more hilarious.
Yeah, but then it's also terrifying beyond belief.
Yeah, it's creepy, but
no,
I think tomatoes is still my top.
Obviously, the way that this series works is that we ask people at home for the suggestions for the next episode. What do you reckon, Nish? Do you have any ideas for what we could ask people to suggest?
I don't know. The SCP was my idea, wasn't it?
It was your idea. So you're saying I have to do it.
So you have to do it this time.
All right. Tell you what. Let's get a little more personal, because we've been asking for things that are like from we asked for things from fiction. Now we're asking for something from the SCP. I want people to tell me the worst thing that you've been asked to do as part of paid employment. I'm thinking like because everybody's had crappy jobs in the past. A job where someone has said, you need to do this, and you're like, what the fuck? Why would you ask me to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Like Carl told that story once of when there was like that clogged toilet, I think, in the nightclub he used to work in, and like it was flooding, there was shit everywhere, and the boss told him to force one of the new starters, it was like their first day, to do it. And it was the reason Carl quit the job, because he was like, I'm not working for people who would make a new starter do that on their first day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stuff like that. Nothing too illegal, I would say. Like, unless you refuse to do it, and then it's fine. And obviously, you don't need to give any names, and I won't include any names in the videos. Feel free to comment after the video's out and admit to it being your story, but I don't use any names just in case the stories are of a sensitive nature. But yeah.
Or they still work at that establishment. You don't want to
Yes.
get me in trouble. They just happened to see this video.
You can put down
Or that
a
video.
friend of mine did this.
Hmm.
No. But no, if you haven't checked out the SCP Foundation website, I would recommend it. It's
It's a lot to go through.
yeah, there's a lot of them there, but any one you click on could be fascinating. Like, obviously, I had to look through a ton to find the ones for this episode. Some of the ones that I were like shortlisted but didn't make the cut. There's one where it's like a disease that makes you produce milk, and if you don't get milked enough, then you produce or you have udders on your body. That was one.
Oh god.
There's one that's like a forbidden rock paper scissors technique, where if you do it correctly, your arm turns into a like tentacle. That was one that I was there. There's one where there's a house where the windows will occasionally steam up, and somebody from another dimension can talk to you by writing on the windows. But apparently that the person's really racist against humans.
Oh.
So the
mind.
doctor who talks to them has to pretend he's not human, otherwise the thing won't talk to him. Yeah, there's so many out there that are just strange and interesting and definitely worth a look. But no, thank you for joining me, Nisha.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
And I'll see you in the next episode, everyone, of Calling All Commenters. Yeah, subscribe, Patreon, and everything else. I'm assuming you're pulling an expression.
I was dancing.
Ah.